Welcome back, everyone. This is part 9, I believe, of our RPG series, and in today's episode, we're just going to hop right in. I'm going to explain in Paint what we're going to do. So in today's episode, we want to create knockback with our player and with our skeleton. So our goal is here is our player, and our skeleton is right here. I'll leave it like 1 foot or whatever. And so as the skeleton moves towards our player, we're going to want a area where our player will detect this monster, and this monster will also have an area. And once these two areas collide, we want our player to get knocked back this way. And then we also want our skeleton to get knocked back this way. So this is important because each thing has its separate direction, right? So the first thing to keep in mind is that these are two separate things that we're going to have to do. So in order to push the player back in one direction, that's a task of its own, which I think we'll do. And then we can try to also push our monster back. Another thing we'll want to do later on is, I'm not sure if we'll get to it in this episode, but maybe it can be homework after. I should see, is when our player attacks, it creates an area, right? So that area is a little cylinder here. And if our monster is anywhere near this area, we want to knock it back in that direction, in whatever direction we want, I guess. So yeah, we will play around with that later on because this can be a bit more interesting in the sense that there are 4 different directions. There's right, there's one up here, there's one up here, there's one up here, and there's one down here, right? And every time I hit something, I don't want it to get knocked back. So if my monster is coming back, I'll kind of erase the little thing. So if here's our monster here, here's our little skeleton, this guy. If our skeleton is coming at an angle and we hit the skeleton on the right side, we don't want to knock it back while the monster is here and then knock it back this way to the right. We want to knock it back at the angle that it was running at us. However, we want to also keep in mind that if I hit it from the downwards angle, it should still knock it back in that angle, right? So we'll play around with angles and stuff like that. I'll kind of explain a little bit as much as I can because we're not actually using angles too much in the player knockback. So let's get right into it. Hopefully now you're kind of understood with my amazing stick drawing. So in order to knock back, there's a few variables we're going to have to set, or not few, just one. I'm going to just copy paste this. It's going to be our knockback direction. And this is going to be persistent in our player and our skeleton. So we need one for both. So in our, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to create an area 2D. So we want an area for both the player and the skeleton. And we will name this guy player detect. Spell it right. I can't spell it right because I am apparently illiterate. I once got called illiterate by a kid. This was like last summer, actually. That was great. We ended up kicking him out of camp, but you know, it is what it is. So for the player detection, we want to make sure that it's actually slightly bigger than the collision, because if it's inside, then our area on the player will never touch this area, right? So let's go back to our player, and let's also add an area 2D with a collision shape. Give it another shape. We'll give it a circle as well. Make it smaller. Make it circular around the... Actually, no, we'll make it a rectangle. We'll make it slightly bigger than the area that our player collides in. If I can actually move it, there we go. All right, so now we're going to rename this to, what do I have it here in my thing? We'll name it Knock Back. No, we'll just do hostile detect. There we go. I can spell. I swear I can spell. I promise. I'm not actually very good at English, but English is my first language. I'm just not good at spelling and English language, I suppose. So now what we're going to do, okay, so this is the interesting part. So before we've been working with body entered, and what body entered checks for is the body itself. So the collision, or the kinematic body, right? So this is called the kinematic body. It's going to check for that body. However, now it becomes a bit awkward because there's a lot of different collision shapes within our body of our skeleton, right? So it's a bit hard to detect, okay, which one are we looking for? Well, we're looking for this specific one. So how can we do that? Well, we can use something else called area entered, right? So we're going to use area entered instead. I think you can get it to work with body entered, but it's a bit more awkward. I think you would have to change this to a body, maybe a rigid body, but that's a bit weird. So we'll just use area 2D. So area 2D is very good, and we can just use area entered. And so to test this, what we can do is we can print out area dot name. And let's see what happens when I play. So every time I enter an area, it's going to automatically print it. So as you can see, we have attack detector because that entered it. So if I attack, it'll enter it every time. However, we can also do the same thing for this guy. So that's an area 2D because we didn't rename it. And then when we go to this guy, 3 things happen. Oh, no, just two, because the skeleton only has 2 different areas. Let's move this down a little bit. So we have the player check, and then we have the player detect, right? So what we can do is we can copy that and go to our player, and we can say if player detect in area dot name, then we can do something. And what are we going to do? Well, we want to set the knockback, right? So in here, let me just double check. We are going to, where is it? Here we go. We're going to set our knockback, just our knockback. So this is the player knockback. So we actually have to set that. I just realized I didn't set that. We're actually going to copy paste this. We're going to have knockback in our own. Oops, can't save that because it doesn't work. And then we're going to set this equal to the area dot get parent dot knockback direction. So what this is doing is we're setting our own knockback. Oh, I can't spell apparently. Maybe I actually am illiterate. Who knows? Okay, so what we're doing is we're setting our own knockback, so our player knockback, right, equal to the area, so our skeleton area, which is player detect, the parent of it, which is this guy, which is good because we want to go into this script, right? So the script is only in our actual body, which is up here. So we get the area, which is player detect, and then we go up, we get our parent, we go into the script, and we're going to get the knockback direction. So what is the knockback direction? Well, the knockback direction should actually be updated every time it moves. Okay, this is our player script, hostile. Every time we move, and we can actually just put it under here, and we can say knockback direction is equal to direction. And the reason this works is, let me just double check that's actually what I do. Yeah, that is. The reason this works is because, let's bring up paint. Okay, here's our player. Whenever our skeleton is moving towards our player, it's setting the direction, right? So this is the direction, the angle. It has an angle, or it has a vector 2 coordinate, right? So it's like -1 and 1, for example. That's an angle, right? So it'll take this angle and set it as the knockback direction. Why is it the same? Well, because we're trying to knock back our player this way. If I wanted to knock back my player towards me, I would set it to negative direction. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but I don't know, maybe you have a special game. So we're trying to knock back our player this way, so we can just set back that. So here's our skeleton, here's our player, and if our zombie comes this way, we want to knock it back in that same direction, right? Let's say, for example, if you wanted to knock it back this way, well, you can edit it by doing like the x-axis would be minus or something like that. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but as long as you understand the logic behind this, then yeah, that's it. So we have the knockback direction equal to direction, and then in our player, we set the knockback equal to that knockback direction. Now, so far, nothing is going to work. Why? Because we're not moving in our process function. So in our physics process, for our player, there's 2 lines of code that we're going to use. And I'm just going to copy paste it, so it saves me some time. So the first one is we're going to set our knockback equal to knockback.move towards that direction, or sorry, it's from 0 to 200 times delta. So 200 times delta will be our knockback speed, essentially. You could set this as a variable like this one, but I'm too lazy. So it's going to basically set a point where we want to move towards, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually move towards it. So we're going to move and slide, right? And the reason why this won't take over this part is because we're only setting the knockback to this. And eventually the knockback will be equal to the vector 0. So eventually knockback will be equal to 0. And if it is equal to 0, there's nothing to move and slide to. So now I think this is it actually. So let's test it. Now if I play, if I hit this guy, nothing happens. If I hit this guy, nothing happens. Let's find out why. Let's see. What am I missing? We got knockback direction. Times 120. We also want to give this guy speed, essentially, because the knockback was tiny. That's why it wasn't showing. All right, there we go. So now we have a knockback. So every time our area or our skeleton hits us, it knocks us back. Obviously, this isn't perfect because I can kind of hit him and just start hugging him. But that's okay. The reason why I can start hugging him is because I'm moving in the same direction as him, and the knockback isn't the same strength. Right? So I can move and reduce the knockback. So if you want, you can increase the knockback strength by just like increasing it here. Oh, getting off screen. Where's our skeleton? Here it is. So you can increase the strength by doing it here or here. I think here is best. You can do like 200 there. Let's change that back to 200. Okay, there we go. That's much more. So even if I start running towards him, it'll still knock me back. And so you can kind of change this up so that, what I won't do this in this, I won't do this at all actually, but what you can do is you can check to see if the input vector is not 0. So for example here, if we are moving, I suppose, then we can double the knockback. We can say the knockback is equal to this, or if I am moving, if I'm not moving, it's equal to this. If I am moving, it's equal to this. The reason being because maybe you want the knockback consistent depending on if the player is moving towards the skeleton or not, right? So it's up to you and how you want to change that up, but that's how knockback works for a player. All right, so we have a bit of time, so let's create knockback within our skeleton as well. So this is very simple. So we're actually going to go to our player. We're going to copy paste this guy to go to our skeleton, and we're just going to pop that right in there. And then we also want to create knockback. And now what we have to do is we have to do the same thing though with our player. So in our player, or sorry, our skeleton, we're going to have to set the knockback in our skeleton. So we have to do hostile detect and change this here. So we're going to get the hostile. We also have to get the knockback direction, which I think I set. Yeah, I have the knockback direction here, but I also have to set it as I'm moving. So here's the fun, interesting part. The knockback direction is equal to 0. So let's see what happens if I knock into my player. So I don't think it actually gets knocked back at all. Let's actually change the player. Let's change this to 1 for now to see if my skeleton gets knocked back. No, he does not. The reason being because this guy is equal to 0. So the knockback is never going to be updated. Now, setting it here to direction was easy because the skeleton is automatically moving towards us, right? However, we don't really have a direction here. What we do have is we have input vector. So we can actually set it to input vector. And now when I'm moving towards our skeleton, it knocks it back in that direction, right? So if I'm moving downwards like that, it'll now throw it in that direction essentially, right? That's quite a bit actually. So let's change this. Let's say I want the knockback to be 100. And then we can change this to 100 as well. And now there should be knockback between both of us, I believe, unless I'm not moving. So if I'm not moving, because my input vector is 0, then the knockback direction will be 0. So I can no longer knock back our skeleton. So this is up to you to how you want your game to work. What you can do, I wouldn't recommend this. I don't know. I'll just say it anyways. What you can do is check. We actually have it right here. If it's equal to 0, so we can have this here. And then we can have a special case for 0. We can say vector to right. This isn't the best case because okay, well, everything's gone. So let's restart. This isn't the best case because if I'm standing still, it'll knock back the skeleton to the right. Right? As you can see, it's kind of moving to the right a bit. So it'll always move it back to the right, including if I'm here. Right? So this isn't the best case, but you can do something similar to that. What you can do if you want is check for the instead of this, you can match a case. You can match case. I don't know, right. So if you're looking to the right, knock it back this way. If you're looking to the left, knock it back that way, or whatever. So you can also do that by get parameter, I think. So you should be able to. Let's actually test that. At this point, I'm kind of just testing with you guys. So let's do print animated tree dot get parameter idle blend position. I don't know if that's a function. Oh, it is. Awesome. Okay, let's now do this. Knockback direction equals get that position. Okay, we're gonna have to restart because, and then let's actually make this 1 so that way it looks, so we know our skeleton is being knocked back. Awesome. Okay, so this is a bit awkward, but this works a little better because if I'm looking at the skeleton, it'll knock it back in that direction that I'm looking at, right? So yeah, this is an option. I'm actually going to remove that though. So let's take that out. And then I'll put this outside of that function, and I'll change this back to 100. Awesome. So now we have knockback with our player and our skeleton without any attacking yet. So the attacking will work on next time because it's going to involve a bit more direction play, which would be fun. So I want you to think about it. Yeah, I will give a hint. It does involve the direction that the thing is moving at us, right? So we have the direction here, and we have the knockback direction, and yeah, I want you to try to figure it out. So use the player attack. So remember, we have the exact same area. We have hostile detector and attack detector, right? So I want you to try to figure out how to attack a skeleton with using this area. I think that's it for your homework. Figure that out. Like and subscribe. Comment down below if you can figure it out before the next video. What else? Yeah, I don't know. I would recommend you guys try to figure this out before watching the next video if it's already out. Because this helps you learn. This is how you learn. You take things you kind of already know and you redo it. You redo it a billion times. So I've done things that I already know how to do like a million times, and that's how I memorize it, or that's how I remember it. A lot of the times when I'm learning, especially, like for animation tree, for example, I have to redo this a few times, or I have to use a reference from something else that I've done in the past. So I'll have games. I'll always save my games that are projects that I make, because there's always certain things that I might have to refer back to in a new game because I forget how to do it. But the best way to learn is to just do things over and over and over and over again. I think there's better ways to learn, but I think that is one of the most, it's the most mind-numbing ways to learn, I suppose. It's not the most efficient, but it is definitely a good way to learn. So I will recommend that, and I will see you guys next time. So subscribe, like, comment, share this video if you guys want, and I will see you guys in episode 10, I think.